Checking your phone within the first 20 minutes of waking up is the fastest way to forfeit control of your entire day. We've been conditioned to believe that a quick morning scroll is just a harmless way to wake up or stay informed, but it's actually a beautifully packaged trap. The moment you illuminate that screen, you subvert your brain's natural transition into focus, flooding your cognitive battery with borrowed urgency and cheap dopamine before you've even stepped out of bed. By letting external chaos dictate your first thoughts, you spend the rest of the day playing catch-up against an invisible exhaustion. Fortunately, protecting your morning doesn't require a grueling, 2-hour monastic routine. You just need to claim the first 20 minutes for yourself to completely rewrite the trajectory of your focus and energy. The transition between sleep and wakefulness is supposed to be a sacred, quiet buffer. When you first open your eyes, your brain is operating in a unique, highly receptive state. It is calm, deeply intuitive, and slowly waking up its processing power. But for most of us, the very first physical action we take every single morning isn't stretching, breathing, or greeting the day. It's a blind, instinctual reach to the nightstand to silence an alarm, followed immediately by the fateful thumb swipe that unlocks the screen. In less than 60 seconds, the trajectory of your entire day is decided. You haven't even sat up yet. Your feet haven't touched the cold floor, but the hijack is already complete. Think about the psychological vulnerability of that exact moment. You are still half wrapped in the remnants of your dreams, completely defenseless, and you choose to open a digital portal that connects you to the chaotic collective consciousness of the entire world. In an instant, you invite thousands of voices, opinions, breaking news alerts, unread emails, and curated lifetimes straight into your bedroom. You wouldn't invite a stadium full of screaming strangers into your house the second you wake up, yet pulling down that notification shade does exactly that. This is the moment the hook warned you about, the harmless morning scroll that is actually a beautifully packaged trap. You tell yourself you're just checking the time, or looking at the weather, or making sure you didn't miss anything crucial overnight. But the reality is far more insidious. Within 60 seconds, your brain ceases to be the author of its own day and instead becomes a reactive machine, adjusting itself to the demands, stresses, and agendas of everyone else. As you lie there, bathed in the blue light of the screen, your internal narrative is instantly replaced. You see an urgent email from a colleague, and your anxiety spikes. You see a headline about global instability, and a subtle layer of dread settles into your chest. You see a flawless, highly edited video of someone else's vacation, and a quiet sense of inadequacy begins to brew. Your cognitive battery, which was supposed to be fully charged and ready to power your own dreams, goals, and focus, is already leaking energy. You are draining your battery on things you cannot control before you've even had a sip of water. The logic here is unforgiving. If you allow your mind to be hijacked in the first 60 seconds, you spend the remaining 16 hours of the day reacting to the world rather than acting upon it. You have effectively trained your brain to look outward for direction rather than looking inward. The clean slate of a new morning is instantly scribbled over with digital noise, making it nearly impossible to find clarity later on. You feel tired by 10 a.m., not because you lacked sleep, but because you surrendered your mental sovereignty before your day even began. The trap has sprung, the hijack is successful, and the invisible exhaustion has already taken root. Once the 60-second hijack takes hold, the trap snaps shut, smoothly transitioning your brain into a state of borrowed urgency. This is where the initial morning scroll morphs from a brief lapse in discipline into a profound psychological shift that alters how you perceive time, priority, and stress for the rest of the day. When you lie in bed reading emails, scanning notifications, or swiping through a social feed, you are looking at a digital landscape entirely constructed out of other people's priorities. An unread message from a manager is their emergency. A notification about a brand new, must-have product is a marketer's target. A breaking news headline is a media outlet's bid for your attention. None of these things belong to you. Yet the moment they enter your field of vision, your brain treats them as if they are matters of life and death. This happens because the human brain is deeply wired for survival. It cannot easily distinguish between a genuine, real-world threat and a highly stressful text message. When you consume these digital inputs first thing in the morning, your nervous system responds by flooding your body with cortisol and adrenaline. You are suddenly thrown into a low-grade, invisible fight-or-flight mode. Your heart rate ticks up slightly, your breathing becomes shallower, and an undercurrent of tension takes root. You have effectively borrowed the urgency, anxiety, and frantic energy of the outside world and adopted it as your own. The tragedy of this state is that it completely distorts your internal compass. Because your morning began under the heavy weight of external demands, your brain loses its ability to accurately measure what truly matters to you. When you finally get out of bed, make your coffee, and sit down to work on your own projects, your business, or your personal health, you find yourself utterly unable to focus. Every task on your own to-do list feels secondary to the chaotic backlog of digital data you absorbed an hour earlier. You feel a persistent, nagging itch to check your phone again, desperate to see if the situations you read about have resolved themselves, or if a new fire has broken out that requires your attention. By adopting this borrowed urgency, you forfeit the power of proactive creation and condemn yourself to a day of pure, frantic reaction. You aren't building your own life. You are merely reacting to the lives, demands, and whims of others. You become like a ship captain who sets sail without checking the map, allowing every passing wave and shift in the wind to dictate the direction of the vessel. By mid-morning, you find yourself deeply overwhelmed, feeling as though you've been working intensely for hours when, in reality, you haven't moved an inch closer to your own goals. You haven't spent energy on your growth. You've wasted your prime cognitive fuel managing a beautifully packaged illusion of necessity that could have easily waited until noon. If you're tired of spending your days reacting to the world instead of building your own life, it's time to stop letting your morning happen to you. I've put together the exact path to help you break this cycle. It's a 30-day practical roadmap to master your discipline, reset your mindset, and build habits that actually stick, without the overwhelm. You can claim your copy of this roadmap right now through the link in the description below. And if you want to make sure you never miss the next steps to reclaiming your mind, make sure to follow the channel right now. Let's step out of the trap. When you choose to step out of the trap and stop letting your morning happen to you, you begin to see the invisible forces pulling the strings of your behavior, the habits that actually stick. The ones that build true, lasting discipline fail to take root not because you lack willpower, but because your brain's internal reward system has been systematically sabotaged before your feet even touch the floor. To master your mindset without the overwhelming frustration of failed resolutions, you have to understand the chemical transaction taking place during those fatal first 20 minutes. You have to understand the dopamine debt. Dopamine is often misunderstood as the molecule of pleasure. In reality, it is the molecule of anticipation, motivation, and drive. It is the chemical whisper that says, "Look at this, pursue this, do this again." Under natural conditions, your brain wakes up with a clean, balanced reservoir of this neurochemical. It is designed to be spent slowly, earned through meaningful effort, like completing a challenging task, working on a creative project, or moving closer to a long-term goal. But when you reach for your phone in those first 20 minutes, you bypass the natural order entirely. The moment you open an app, you are hit with a massive, effortless surge of cheap dopamine. Every shocking headline, every vibrant video is a jackpot in a digital casino that you didn't even realize you entered. Your brain registers this sudden flood of neurochemicals and instantly recalibrates. It says, "Wow, we just got a massive reward, and we didn't have to lift a finger for it." This is where the debt is incurred. By flooding your system with effortless stimulation so early, you artificially spike your baseline. Your brain, seeking equilibrium, immediately responds by downregulating its receptors. In simple terms, it turns down the volume on your ability to feel motivated. The reservoir is suddenly drained, leaving you in a deep chemical deficit before the day has even properly begun. Think about the logical consequence of starting your morning in a dopamine debt. By 10 a.m., when you finally sit down to do the actual work required to build a better version of yourself, whether that's writing, studying, or organizing your business, your brain looks at the task and rebels. Real life is slow. Real progress requires focus, patience, and sustained effort. Compared to the lightning-fast, high-octane stimulation you fed your brain while lying in bed, deep work feels incredibly boring, frustrating, and painfully dry. You find yourself sitting at your desk, staring at a blank screen, utterly paralyzed by overwhelm. You feel an irresistible, almost physical itch to pick up your phone just one more time, desperately chasing another quick hit to bring your chemistry back up to par. You blame yourself for lacking discipline, but the game was rigged from the start. You cannot build a focused, disciplined mind on top of a burnt-out reward system. You are trying to drive a car with an empty fuel tank, wondering why you can't keep up with the traffic. The morning scroll didn't just steal 20 minutes of your time, it stole your capacity to care about your own future for the rest of the day. Once the dopamine debt is firmly established, your entire day shifts from a purposeful march forward into an exhausting, demoralizing battle against your own biology. This is the stage where you find yourself swimming upstream. You are no longer navigating your day with the wind at your back. You are fighting a violent, invisible current that you created during those first 20 minutes in bed. The most frustrating part of this experience is that you are usually completely blind to the root cause. You sit at your desk, looking at your goals, your tasks, or your creative projects, and you feel an overwhelming weight pressing down on your chest. You have the desire to succeed. You know exactly what you need to do. And yet, there is a profound, painful disconnect between your intentions and your actions. Every sentence you try to write feels clunky. Every spreadsheet feels agonizingly complex. Every decision requires a mountain of mental effort. This isn't a flaw in your character or a sudden loss of talent. It is the direct logical consequence of the burnt-out reward system we just explored. Because your brain's dopamine baseline was artificially spiked and then crashed by the morning scroll, your brain now perceives normal, productive reality as a sensory desert. It is actively starving for stimulation, and as a result, it goes on a frantic, subconscious strike. It refuses to cooperate with you. To compensate for this lack of natural focus, you are forced to rely entirely on raw, unadulterated willpower. You try to force yourself to concentrate. You grit your teeth, close your extra browser tabs, and vow to push through the slump. But willpower is a finite, highly unstable resource. It acts like a temporary cognitive battery, and when you are forced to use it just to maintain basic attention, you drain it at an alarming rate. By noon, you haven't just completed very little work, you are also completely mentally spent. As you swim upstream, struggling to make headway, the digital trap waiting in your pocket becomes infinitely more seductive. Your brain, desperate to escape the friction of deep work, whispers a familiar lie, just check your phone for 5 minutes. A quick break will refresh you. But you already know how that story ends. That 5-minute break turns into a 20-minute spiral, plunging you even deeper into the dopamine deficit. The entire afternoon becomes a cycle of guilt and distraction. You look at the clock and realize hours have passed, yet your most important tasks remain untouched. You feel a creeping sense of inadequacy, wondering why everyone else seems to have their life together while you are constantly drowning in overwhelm. You finish the day feeling deeply fatigued, but it is a hollow, unfulfilling kind of tiredness. It's the exhaustion of a person who spent all day running on a treadmill, burning massive amounts of energy but ending up exactly where they started. You didn't lose your day because you were lazy. You lost your day because you handed the oars to someone else before you even stepped onto the boat. The exhaustion of swimming upstream, fighting a losing battle against your own biology, brings you to a critical realization. You cannot fix a broken day in the afternoon. If you wait until you are already drowning in distraction to try and find your focus, you've waited too long. The secret to effortless discipline isn't about fighting harder against the current. It's about changing the direction of the river entirely. To stop playing catch-up, you must replace the chaotic morning trap with a protective shield, the first 20 blueprint. This blueprint is not another overwhelming, hyper-optimized 2-hour routine that requires you to wake up at 4 a.m., plunge into an ice bath, and meditate for an hour. That is just another form of pressure that leads straight back to avoidance. Instead, this is about fiercely protecting just the first 20 minutes of your day. It is about drawing a hard, non-negotiable boundary between the moment your eyes open and the moment you allow the outside world to enter your consciousness. Think of these 20 minutes as the calibration phase for your mind. When you wake up, instead of a blind, instinctual reach for the screen, you leave the phone exactly where it belongs, face down, out of reach, or better yet, in another room. By refusing to illuminate that screen, you allow your brain to complete its natural, gentle transition into wakefulness. You preserve your cognitive battery. Your cortisol levels remain stable, your breathing stays deep, and your internal reward system remains perfectly balanced. In this protected window, you reclaim your role as the author of your day. You step out of bed, stretch, drink a glass of water, and look out the window. By exposing your eyes to natural morning light instead of a blue screen, you signal to your circadian rhythm that it's time to wake up, naturally boosting your energy without a chemical spike. You give your mind the rare, beautiful gift of empty space. In this quiet buffer, you aren't consuming other people's emergencies or digesting high-octane digital noise. You are simply allowing your own thoughts, your own goals, and your own voice to surface. The logical transformation that happens when you execute this blueprint is profound. Because you didn't incur a dopamine debt at 7 a.m., your brain's chemistry remains clean and highly sensitive. When you finally sit down to work or dive into the habits that build a better version of yourself, you are no longer swimming upstream. Deep work no longer feels like a dry, boring chore because your brain hasn't been desensitized by a digital jackpot. Focus becomes your natural state, not something you have to brutally force with finite willpower. By the time you finally check your phone, now completely on your own terms, with a clear mind and a structured plan, the world can no longer hijack you. You are no longer reacting to a beautifully packaged trap. You are acting with absolute intention. You didn't just save 20 minutes of time, you saved the next 16 hours of your life. You have rewritten the trajectory of your energy, claimed your mental sovereignty, and built a foundation where your best habits can finally stick.